welcome to TLS Extra. My name's Lee Slomp. I am Chief Advisor Professional Standards at the AusIMM. I'm joined today by Marc Upcroft, National Mining Leader for PwC in Australia. Welcome, Marc.
Thanks, Lee. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So, Marc, can you tell us a bit about the PwC Aussie Mine Report?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Hot off the press. So Aussie Mine is an annual analysis that we do of Australia's mining industry. It really focuses on the mid-tier sector, and it's our 18th year. So it's got a rich history when you put it all together. We focus on the state of the industry in its current shape, but also look very forward in terms of the opportunities and challenges ahead. It's very clear when you look at the analysis this year that we're in a period of great opportunity and also some challenges. This year's theme is around critical choices, and there's lots of different layers to that theme. We've got critical choices to make as a country, critical choices to make as an industry, but that also flows down to communities, to companies, and individuals.
This year's report discusses 4 separate scenarios for Australia. Can you give us a quick outline of those 4 scenarios?
I guess the analysis this year is really centred around a big opportunity for Australia. So we can generate effectively $170 billion in GDP and create 330,000 jobs by 2040 in Australia if we really capitalise on our great endowment of critical minerals. So that's effectively the potential first prize based on that economic modelling. We did look at 4 alternate futures for Australia's mining sector based on that. And it ranges from developing downstream capability to really shaping in international markets as well. And effectively, when you put the first prize together, $170 billion in GDP, 330,000 jobs, that's effectively the estimate if we get everything right. If we can unlock that, if we get to align governments, the industry, individual companies and stakeholders into a scenario where we're all taking bold, coordinated action on critical minerals. But effectively, we need to earn it as well. It's not something that's just going to come to us. And when we did this analysis, similar analysis last year, we urged Australia to really think differently and act now as part of this journey. As we reflect on it a year on, it's now more critical. If I look at it from a government lens, there's also a significant potential prize for governments with up to $50 billion in additional tax payments, tax revenues over this period. And so we also pose the question to governments about how much should government invest to realise this opportunity. If it's a $50 billion prize, should they invest $10 billion in that, $20 billion or more?
So if the opportunity for GDP is circa 170 billion, and in terms of that additional tax revenue for government, it's around 50 billion, yet many in industry compare our government's contribution with the $400 billion IRA in the US. Our 2023 Thought Leadership Series panel on critical minerals talked a lot about government investment. Is it actually a question of the amount of money or more where and how that investment is deployed?
It's a really good question, actually. I mean, if I look at it, $170 billion in additional GDP and $50 billion to governments for an economy the size of Australia, that's actually a really big impact. It's natural that we compare it to the US in terms of the IRA. When I reflect on how much activity is stemming from the IRA, it's really quite exciting, quite enormous. So there's no doubt that money talks. All of my conversations with mining companies and particularly those emerging companies that have a great project and probably need a bit of help to accelerate it or get it ready for development, it is clearly not just about the money. And there's a whole range of critical choices that we can make at the policy level in terms of state and federal governments to really help accelerate things. But as I said before, there's no doubt that money talks and money has a big impact. And there is dollars that is needed to be invested in this sector if we're going to really take that first prize.
You mentioned that the report presents 6 areas where critical choices must be made. What are those key areas, and is any one of those more critical than the others?
You're right, Lee. We call out 6 broad areas where some urgent action is needed. And there's more when you actually think about the complex puzzle that's there as well. But the 6 that we've really focused on is funding and incentives to really try and significantly increase exploration activity, infrastructure to support and incentivise further investment, direct market intervention in some markets where there's the potential for market failure, collaboration across both industry and geographies, untangling regulation to accelerate supply, and access to talent. In terms of is one more important than the other, they're all pretty important. And I think as all of the AusIMM thought leadership discussion topics this year really highlights, what we're faced with in this period ahead is a really complex future where there's lots of things that's needed all at once. And so I wouldn't call out anyone in particular, but it will be challenging to try and get everything right in this complex path ahead.
So building a talent pipeline is a theme that we touched on in our Future Workforce panel in the 2023 Thought Leadership Series. This is a perennial wicked problem in the resources sector. Are there any key actions government or industry can take to really positively impact this issue?
You're right, Lee. Attracting people and the right skills has been a key challenge for the industry for a long time. And I suspect we'll be talking about key talent, attracting key talent for a long time to come. It's really important now, and that's only going to intensify as we start to rev things up. So if I go back to the prize of $170 billion in GDP, 330,000 new jobs, etc., underneath all of that's a lot of extra activity. So that whole journey from discovery to development, production, new mines, as we move further downstream in terms of processing, we are going to need access to more talent in the mining sector. And what's becoming clearer is the evolution of skills that's needed for all of that. And it's not just about geologists and needing more mine engineers and metallurgists. We're going to need to attract more skills like data usage and different sorts of technology as well. We do urgently need more geologists and engineers and metallurgists, so there is quite a lot to do, particularly in our universities to rebuild a pipeline there. It is quite significantly it's quite significant, the challenge that we're faced with when we look at where our tertiary sector's got to. And we've also got to do quite a bit more to effectively rebrand the industry to attract more people to it. It should be much easier than it's historically been, given the critical role that the mining industry is playing in decarbonising the global economy. And some of that rebranding starts with all of us who are involved in the mining sector actually sharing our stories in a much more visible way. I must say it's great to see some of that really starting to happen now.
And you mentioned the onus isn't just on government. Our Thought Leadership Series ESG and Sustainability panel spoke to the role of industry in adopting more sustainable principles like the circular economy. What are the critical choices and opportunities facing mining companies at this point in time?
It's pretty clear to me, Lee, that most mining companies have the opportunity to turn ESG from compliance into strategic value. And we urgently need action on finding and developing new mines, but it has to also be done the right way. You know, the critical role that as an industry we play in net zero isn't going to be a free kick on the ESG front. And there's clear signs that the Australian industry is recognising this and starting to take the appropriate action, some faster than others. It's one of those critical choices that at the company level are being made. Very clear to me that the successful mining companies of the future will be the ones that have fully integrated ESG into their strategy. So a lot to do on that front. In terms of circular economy, that's a harder one. I was at the circular economy session a little earlier. It seems to me that it's it's a much harder topic for the market to solve all of the problems that we're going to face in terms of the circular economy and solve them early enough. So I do think on circular economy, it's probably going to be one of those areas where regulation is going to have to play a leading role in really shaping that.
So thanks very much for joining us today, Marc. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you on our TLS Extra.
Great, thanks, Lee. Many challenges, opportunities, and critical choices ahead.
Thanks for joining us on TLS Extra. We look forward to seeing you next year for our 2024 Thought Leadership Series.